On February 20th, 2026, an event that historians would call a legal earthquake occurred in Washington. The U.S. Supreme Court issued an unprecedented verdict, ruling Donald Trump's massive tariffs on European goods illegal and exceeding the authority of the executive branch. But instead of complying, Trump launched a veritable media storm. From the steps of the White House, amid the flashing lights of hundreds of cameras, he tore up a copy of the court ruling. His voice, amplified by loudspeakers, boomed over Lafayette Square. Judges are not elected by the people to peddle our industry. If the law prevents America from winning, then we need a new law. In Brussels, this was perceived as the end of the rule of law in the U.S. Ursula von der Leyen and EU leaders waited in anticipation, realizing that Trump was not simply ignoring the court. He was declaring war on the very system of the global order. This was the beginning of an era of tariff absolutism, where the will of one man weighs more heavily than the constitution of superpower. Trump's face at this moment is a mask of fury and triumph, captured in harsh, comic book-style shadows. Without waiting until morning, Trump signed an executive order imposing a universal basic tariff of 10% on all imports without exception. It was a masterstroke on the European economy, which was just beginning to recover from the energy crisis. The ports of Rotterdam, Hamburg, and Antwerp instantly turned into chaos. Thousands of containers carrying German cars, French wine, and Italian fashion were stuck in legal limbo. Trump called it a tax on the right of access to the greatest market on earth. Brussels called the decision economic terrorism. The European Commission began an emergency meeting trying to find a countervailing response, but European bureaucracy is too slow compared to Trump's lightning-fast attacks. EU leaders look like chess players facing boxing gloves. Trump mocks their sluggishness on social media, posting cartoons of European weaklings. The trade war has officially entered the annihilation phase, where every percent of tax is a bullet fired into the heart of the transatlantic alliance. Germany, as Europe's industrial engine, bore the brunt of the blow. Trump targeted the German auto industry, declaring that Mercedes and BMWs fill our streets while our factories rust. He issued an ultimatum to Chancellor Merz. Either Germany shift 50% of its production to the U.S. within a year, or the tariff on German cars would rise to 50%. It was outright blackmail. Merz, known for his tough character, responded in the style of the steel chancellor, declaring that Germany would not bow to a dictate from across the ocean. In comic book form, it's a clash of two industrial titans, Trump as an oil baron versus Merz as a steel engineer. They stand on opposite sides of the Atlantic, and the Earth's crust is cracking beneath their feet. For Germany, it's a matter of national survival. If factories in Bavaria, close to open in South Carolina, the German dream will die. Trump understands this and is pressing on the most sensitive point, knowing that without German money, the European Union will collapse like a house of cards in a strong wind. The EU understands that it has little chance of winning a classic trade war against Trump, so Brussels strikes where the U.S. is most vulnerable, in the digital space. The European Commission announces the introduction of a technological occupation tax, which will tax every bit of data owned by American tech giants. Trump is furious. This is a direct attack on his Silicon Valley allies. In response, he threatens to completely cut off Europe from American cloud services and GPS. It's a digital Armageddon. In graphic novel style, leaders are transformed into hacker gods manipulating global networks. Macron calls for the creation of digital sovereignty, but Trump only laughs. You can't even launch a messenger without our chips. The battle for data is becoming bloodier than the battle for oil. People in Paris and Berlin look in horror as their smartphones begin to turn into useless shards of glass. Trump has his hand on the internet's main switch, ready to plunge Europe into the information Middle Ages if his tariffs are not adopted. While trade tariffs rattle stock markets, Trump plays his craziest card yet, Greenland. In March 2026, he officially declares Denmark incapable of defending the Arctic, and the United States is taking the island under temporary guardianship. This effectively annexes part of European territory. Trump calls Greenland future real estate, essential for national security. Denmark is shocked, and the EU announces the mobilization of the European Rapid Reaction Force. The comic depicts the snow-covered Arctic wastelands, where American Marines land against a backdrop of glaciers, while European diplomats try to stop them with paper protests. Trump, in a fur cape, looks like a conqueror of the North standing on the tip of an iceberg. For Europe, this is a humiliation too much to swallow. If Greenland falls, Iceland, or even the Norwegian continental shelf could be the next target. Trump is using the northern cold to freeze the last vestiges of European pride, turning the Arctic into his personal playground for rare earth metal mining. At the annual forum in Davos, Trump puts on a show that divides the world into before and after. He enters the hall to the jeers of European bankers and the dead silence of politicians. In his speech, he proclaims the death of globalism, declaring that the era of the EU as a unified bloc is over. Trump begins openly proposing separate deals to individual countries, Hungary, Poland, Italy, bypassing Brussels. It's a divide-and-conquer strategy. EU leaders view him as a destroyer of worlds. In the style of a graphic novel, Trump is a giant who tears the EU flag to pieces and distributes them to smaller countries like candy. Brussels tries to maintain unity, but greed and fear of American tariffs are beginning to take their toll. Davos is turning into a marketplace where European sovereignty is sold for the right to export steel to the United States. Trump relishes the chaos, realizing that his greatest strength lies not in taxes, but in his ability to make his allies hate each other more than they hate him. When tariffs fail to produce immediate results, Trump resorts to biological pressure. He blocks imports of European products, citing a sanitary threat from French cheeses and Italian meats. In response, Europe imposes a ban on American GMO corn and soybeans. Supermarkets on both sides of the Atlantic begin to empty. Trump uses this to show his Iowa farmers that he's fighting for them. In cartoon style, it's a battle for daily bread. Trump, as a tyrant farmer, pits himself against European chefs whose kitchens are turning into dungeons. Food prices soar, sparking protests in Paris and Lyon. Macron accuses Trump of trying to create an artificial famine, but Trump merely retorts, "Eat your own rules if you don't have our grain." Food security becomes the last frontier. Leaders are ready to starve their people rather than admit defeat in this tariff duel. On the financial front, Trump strikes a blow to the euro. He announces a dollar devaluation and the start of a buying spree of European bonds to destroy the EU's credit rating. Global stock markets turn blood red. The euro falls below parity with the dollar, destroying the purchasing power of millions of Europeans. Trump declares, "The euro is a piece of paper backed by nothing but the empty promises of bureaucrats." Like a graphic novel, it's a battle of two currency titans. The dollar, a golden monster with Trump's face. The euro, a fragile glass maiden. The glass maiden is beginning to crack. Investors panic and flee to American assets, effectively financing Trump's trade war against themselves. The central bank in Frankfurt works around the clock, trying to stem the bleeding, but Trump fires off new tweets every hour, acting like financial bombs. Europe's economic sovereignty is melting before our eyes, turning into numbers on monitors controlled by one man in Washington. Trump's final trump card is energy. He blocks American LNG supplies to unfriendly European countries that support taxes on American tech giants. Germany and Austria are on the brink of power outages. Trump declares, "American energy for American friends. If you want to stay warm, pay your taxes." In the cartoon, it appears as a freezing continent, where the city lights go out one by one. Trump holds a gas valve, his face shrouded in frosty steam. Macron and Merz try to negotiate with Qatar and Norway, but Trump has already bought up all the spare capacity through his corporations. Europe realizes it has fallen into the trap of total dependence. Trump uses the cold as a political tool, forcing European leaders to crawl to him on their knees for every cubic meter of gas. This is the end of an independent Europe, either total capitulation or immersion in darkness and cold. March 2026 ends with the signing of the Washington Pact, a document critics call Europe's act of capitulation. Threatened with complete economic collapse and a freeze, the EU accepts Trump's terms. The 10% tariff remains, the European army is disbanded, and digital taxes are abolished. Trump celebrates victory, declaring that America is once again master of its own home and away. At the end of the graphic novel, we see Trump standing atop the Capitol, looking east across the ocean. Europe has become an economic protectorate, bereft of voice and will. Macron and Merz fade into the shadows of history, abandoning their countries to the mercy of the victor. This is the end of the transatlantic alliance, as we have known it for 80 years. Now there is only one pole of power, one will, and one law. Trump's law. The world has changed forever, and on the ruins of old diplomacy rises a new empire built on tariffs, energy, and ruthless willpower.